Hi, and welcome to episode 30 of the ChessTDD series. As you can see here, I'm going back to to Darren's examples of how to use Specflow in idiomatic fashion here, or at least visual fashion. I'm a novice to this tool, and this struck me as insanely cool, what he laid out. So in the blog post, I have a link to that if you're interested. So I just decided to I hadn't looked at Specflow in a while. The last few episodes were kind of normal C# again for me with implementing that ASCII board builder, so I was kind of getting my bearings here. Now, what I did was I took his stuff, I added a new Specflow feature, and then I promptly, instead of just getting it working the way he had it and then tweaking it from there, I indulged in a sort of hubris without really thinking about it, and just decided, oh, well, I can go ahead and modify this because, I know what I want. It took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out, and the mistake I'm making is right here where I'm deleting the columns. I thought, well, I don't need that. I'm not going to refer to things that way since my ASCII board builder, I'll just iterate through all of the different squares in the chessboard. It turns out that top row there was not purely cosmetic, and it took me a really long time to figure that out. So there's a lesson in there for me, maybe more so than for the rest of you, as you'll watch me kind of sort through and debug this. On the plus side, there are a couple of things that you'll see me doing as troubleshooting techniques that shouldn't have been necessary, but they're interesting to touch on. So anyway, back to the moment. What I'm doing here now is, because of the syntax I used for the pieces being a little different than his, I had to kind of change the spacing on here with this ASCII layout to make it more suitable for what I was doing, which is my piece names are not all two letters because you've got this KN. I think, although I haven't looked it up recently, that's what the standard chess notation is, but I'm going off of memory from a long time ago. So basically, I just had to make those spaces wider. So what I'm going to do is then follow pretty closely with what he's laid out here, which is to actually put these pieces visually on the board and then start talking about, what moves should be available to a particular piece. So I'm going to generate these step definitions, and I'm going to remember, for whatever reason, that Specflow does not like me to generate them, or to use Control-C and Control-V. So for now, I'm going to put the code for this in this normal board setup scenarios.cs class that I have. This class is getting sort of busy, and while I don't have a sense exactly for what I'm going to come to like in terms of splitting this code up, and having these classes that drive the different Specflow features, I know that I'm getting a little far afield of what I might want to do intuitively. So I think there's probably some division of labor to be done here. It also strikes me that these methods with the attributes on top that are like Specflow generated, I probably want in one place, and then maybe to pull out and do a composition kind of thing with the auxiliary methods. I'm not sure yet, though, and I don't tackle it here. I spend the whole time floundering around trying to compensate for this mistake I made. I really did think about going back after the fact and editing this, but again, in the beginning, I said I was just going to show you everything I was doing, embarrassing or not. So what I'm doing here is, I learned from reading a little bit a couple weeks ago about what Darren had done, is that you can have this Specflow. There's this concept of table that gets passed into your methods. So in generating, when I laid out and copy and pasted from his gist, Specflow is smart enough to give me a method with this table as an argument when I did the generate. And now what I know here is that having written this ASCII board builder, I want to enumerate all the different row column combinations of the table essentially go through the board one by one, and the board is represented as a table. And I'm going to pull the particular entry out from that cell of the table and create a piece from it where applicable. So instead of getting really slick with link in the beginning here, especially because I don't know exactly how this table's row and column collection semantics work, I'm just using for each. And I don't get around to it in this episode, but something I'll probably do here is go back later and flatten this and make it nicer looking with link. Especially because another embarrassing thing that I did in here was have some real trouble lining my indices that I had defined in the chess world, where it's 1 through 8 as the rows and columns, with the 0 through 7 row and column index of table, which is more standard, array-based programming fodder. And then also the fact that I'm iterating through the table in terms of the rows in reverse order. This is getting a little strange because I'm covered by tests, so to speak. I'm writing a test method that's actually doing a lot of logic, and that always gets weird. And when I look back on all the problems I had here, this is exactly where test-driven development really helps you. But I wasn't test driving my tests. Now, you can do that. It's worth noting that that you could pop some of this code into actual production code, like I did with the ASCII board builder, and test drive it and tease it out that way. In retrospect, I kind of wish I had done that because of all the dumb things I did here in getting row and column indices correct, and accounting for the fact that they'd be different for the table than they would for the board, and so on and so forth. So, hindsight's 2020. And another thing to take away is that no matter how long you've been doing, I can't speak for everybody, but I've been writing code for a long, long time, and you're just never going to really be very good at this kind of keeping all this weird indexing stuff in your head. There's not going to come a point, I don't think, where you do something like this and you just get it right the first time. And so that's why I find TDD to be so valuable, is you can kind of break it up and solve small problems and build on small wins. So back to the moment here, I can see that I've got an exception that's happening in this builder.build or .add piece, and the board coordinate I'm computing with this sort of relatively complicated indexing scheme. So I decided to say, well, okay, I know it's probably going to be a problem if I'm popping null pieces into the ASCII board builder. I remember that, so I'm going to install this guard for null. But that didn't fix the trick either, so there's something going wrong with the row and column index. And this is where I start to get into trouble, and where you can see that I'm struggling, and where I wish that I had this code under test. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, because I don't remember, I recorded the code for this maybe 3-4 days ago. I don't really remember what the problem is. I'm guessing that that you might not really know off the top of your head what the problem is either. It's probably quite hard to say based on what we're looking at here. Maybe your brain just works like a compiler. Mine doesn't. So what I start to do here is an interesting technique, especially with the continuous testing tool. You can see that I'm just kind of trying things now and saying, okay, so I know that something here is generating an exception. Let me just plug in these different values and see. Okay, so it looks like I got 0, 1, and 2 seem to be good. 6 was good, so I'm 7. I can see that I'm getting an exception. So now let me try the row and the column. Okay. I'm getting an exception because of the because of going to the 7th row. So this is where it takes me a minute, but I do eventually figure out, I should have followed Darren's example more closely. So I'm going to put it back and say, okay, if I if I'm reasoning about this, and I make this 7, do I get an exception? I saw that I did earlier. And I'm kind of staring at this and trying to imagine, why on earth, why is it okay to go to the 7th row, or I'm sorry, the 7th column, but not the 7th row? And so you could see me there just kind of flailing around and trying things. That may seem sort of inexact, but it's great. I don't know if you found this when debugging to sort of go in and just play and see if maybe you have a fundamentally wrong assumption. You could see what I was doing there is counting over and over again. Like, is this right? Do I maybe am I wrong about the number of rows in this thing? So another thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to start to put in an assert right here at the top and say, let me check base assumptions here. Does this table actually have as many rows as I think? So if I'm wrong about this sort of precondition assert that I'm putting in here and the count of the rows is not 7, it's going to bomb out right away. So I say, okay, well, there are 7 rows, so why on earth would accessing... oh, I'm sorry. There are 7 rows, which is unusual. I was expecting 8. And this is where I start to maybe get clued in a little that, something's off. And you can see me counting here again. This seems crazy to me. No, I'm pretty sure I got 8 here. Why is it telling me there are only 7? And eventually I do come around and figure out, oh, I guess that first row that he had in there, that must be the column headers or something. Oops. And so you can see all this time that I wasted, and I'm not done wasting time yet. I'm still going in here, and it's going to be a minute before I figure this out. So now I get the pleasure of watching myself flail embarrassingly at this for a little. Don't remember what all I did, but so here I added an empty row to the end of the table to see if okay, I don't remember exactly what I was thinking, but when you're thrown like that and one of your basic assumptions about what's going on here, in this case that the 8 rows I have here would turn out to be a table of 8 rows, then you kind of get thrown out of whack and you start doing things like, okay, so if I add another row, will I then have 8? And I don't remember exactly what finally inspired me to get this right. Just that it took me longer than I wanted to make that happen. So looking at this, I think what I'm doing here is now trying to figure out which row is missing, I guess. So if I go to the last row and I say that, give me the value of this cell here, in the bottom right corner of the board, am I actually getting this white rook? Yes. Okay, so in the 7th row, or in the 6th row, excuse me. Well, 7th, I guess, if you're 0 indexed. And so I'll just say in the last row and the last column, yes, in fact, there is a white rook there. So that's kind of, I'm making lemonade out of lemons here, but, this is you can see what my process is for narrowing the problem scope. I'm going through and sort of experimentally checking on my assumptions. And now what I'm doing is finally figuring this out and saying I wonder if I go back to the example that the guy whose example I'm using has, and I do it the way he says, if everything will start to work itself out. This is what I mean about hubris. This is something I should have done from the beginning. Instead of just assuming that I can fix this to suit myself, probably just should have gone with what he did at first. Of course, I belie that even now by the fact that I never added in the extra row, or the row that he had there, but I just wanted to see if that would solve the problem. So now my precondition assert is failing, which is what I would expect. So now I go back in and I verify real quick, okay, well, if I augment the number of rows now, okay, Specflow is viewing this now as an 8x8 board or table. So now that mystery is cleared up, I can go back to straightening out this indexing logic that I butchered. One problem that strikes me right off the top is I'm creating board coordinates with the same integers that I'm using to index the table, which is going to fail badly, not just because of the 1 through 8 instead of 0 through 7, but also because of the reverse order in which I'm iterating through the rows in this table. So it strikes me that, oh, okay, I have to define different integers for X and Y for the table and for the chessboard. So what you're going to see now is me struggling with this integer logic for the next little while. And if memory serves, all I really did was get all this straightened out and just finally get this one test working and then verify how cool Darren's approach here is by playing with it kind of at the end. In essence, if I remove a piece from in front of the king, do I suddenly have moves? Versus if I put the pawn back, then I don't. This is a really powerful way of doing things, and I'm really grateful to him for this because I think it's going to help me a lot, at least in this problem domain. And it's kind of going to have my head working, I think, in general for, how do you visually lay out whatever domain you're working in. I have been having ideas of what the next series of codecasts I'll do after this ChessTDD thing is. So maybe we can apply some of this similar reasoning to that. So back at hand here, what I'm starting to do is define the X and Y coordinate in terms of, or for the row and the column on the board in terms of what it is for row and column in the table. Haven't gotten it quite right yet. I think I figured out by now that, oh no, I haven't quite figured it out yet. Why am I using the X and Y coordinate for the board to index the table rows? Hopefully for my own cringing self here as I sit watching this, I get this right soon. It's really, I'll stump a little bit for pair programming here too. When you watch me do this, I'm willing to bet that I do things where you're like, wow, how did he ever think of that? But then at the same time, I probably sit here struggling with things where you're just sitting there at your computer saying like, hey, go use column index and row index in there. What are you doing? And so that's kind of one of the wins of pair programming or mob programming, where you start to complement each other that way. So you're learning from me and the things I'm doing that you never would have thought of, and then you're here to tell me the things that I'm, struggling with and that I feel like probably a good chunk of you out there, if you were sitting here with me when I was doing this problem would already be solved. And don't remember exactly, but when I was recording this code, I probably, at this point with the blinking cursor, was just sitting here in frustration, rubbing my head. But rest assured, because there's only a few minutes left in this clip, I eventually did get it sorted. Excuse me, sorry, got a new desk here I'm not quite used to yet. Did get it sorted. I think I was staring at this trying to figure out why on earth... was I off by 1 or something? I really don't remember, but probably had an aha moment here shortly. And oh, you've got it highlighted. You're so close. It's got any moment now, right? Sure, I gave an exasperated sigh when I finally did figure this out. I've thought at times about like actually, hey, there we go, about recording the audio at the same time that I'm writing the code, but it's a little tough to do sometimes, especially when you're kind of in the middle of thinking. So now I'm getting all the way through and nothing is bombing out, but I think, now after all of this sort of nonsense and messing around unproductively, I actually have to write the test. So the scenario's failing because it's not, there's no assert going on in the then. So I'm going to get rid of this pending stuff, and I'm going to go back to what I was doing. I'm going to generate the board, and I'm going to set that in context using the helper methods I had before. Then going back to what we were doing here earlier, in the in this then statement, I'm going to grab the board out of context and going to figure out, and I don't really have any recollection of this, but I'm going to figure out what should be going on in the board. I don't recall if I actually take the new table that's passed into me and assert that it's empty or exactly what I do, but there's another table coming in here specifically because of the way that's set up with the start and end, and you list those moves out then. But I'm going to assert that given the board that I've set up, there are no moves in it. I think I'm going to get a little more idiomatic about this next time, but for now, I have been a very, very long time in not having a test green, so I want to get to green and then figure out the problems later with what I'm doing. So I don't remember. So the white king, that's my P0. But I think, yeah, so I don't think I got sophisticated enough yet to actually like read the coordinates. I just wanted to get the test screen and then also verify that it would go red if I changed the setup. So this is not really what I ultimately want to have, which is ignoring the parameters to this method. That's not good anywhere, whether you're in a tool or you're in your production code. You don't want to have arguments to a method that you never use. That's a big code smell. So sooner or later, I'm going to get this straightened out, probably in the next episode. But I have a green test, and I'm pretty pumped about that after a lot of banging my head against the metaphorical table. So I'm going to go and I kind of thought about refactoring this method now that I'm green. I thought about running some experiments. I went with the experiments. So, hey, look, now I get a failing test. So that white king there, when I remove the pawn in front of it, has a move. So I am, in fact, correctly testing the thing that I set out to at the beginning of this episode test, although I was probably hoping it would take me about 2 minutes and I could move on. But I have that in place. So at this point, looking at the clock here, so I'm 22 minutes in. I decided to do a little quick renaming cleanup, but then this is already a full episode, and I did decide not to cut it down, so it won't be the most productive. There's a lot to do next time. Refactoring this method, certainly. Getting to the general case of interpreting the moves passed in from the feature rather than just kind of hard coding them in behind. So there's stuff to be done. I'm going to say here, I'm going to lay out a couple of things to do in the Trello board to serve as reminders for next time. Then I don't remember if I checked the code in on video here or not. It is committed and pushed up to the master on GitHub if you want to take a look. Such as it is. So next time around, got to refactor that method and refactor current implementation. Oh, I did not remember to put in the bit about fixing the then, but I will get to all that next time. So until then, take care.